Hi, everybody. It is Tara from Sojourn Psychology, and I am here with Bob Claxton. And he is an international executive coach and trainer with the John Maxwell team. Bob was on my mind for many weeks, and I finally mustered up the courage to reach out and ask him to do a little vlog with us because I see the leadership work that Bob has done coming alongside of for-profit and non-for-profit businesses. And so I really wanted to hear Bob speak about what is leadership in crisis. And he has a two-part series for us. So we're going to start with the first section of what Bob would like to bestow upon us.
Well, thanks, Tara, for the invitation. And it doesn't take any courage to reach out to me. Maybe it does. I'm not so sure, but I'm glad that you did. I was thinking about this when you asked me to consider coming on to your vlog, and it's a privilege. And I'm just thinking about the pandemics. I mean, I've lived a little while, and so I remember what Y2K was like when we went from 1999 to 2000, and how I remember that evening was a New Year's Eve. I had water in the tub so that I had made sure that we had water to drink. I had extra food. I had extra gasoline in the shed. I had it all, and then realized that, everybody said the world was coming to the end, and it didn't. And then I remember in 2001 when 9/11 happened, and we were actually on our way back from the US. We had been to Myrtle Beach, and we were coming back home to Windsor, and we crossed the border 20 minutes later, they actually shut down the border for like 4 weeks, I think it was. And I remember how the world was rocked and how we wondered how we were going to move forward, but we did. And then we come to COVID-19. And I think one of the key things that everybody's been saying is it's an unprecedented thing, but the reality is it's not. There have been crises for years. Some people are having crises every day. And so it's unique, but it's not unprecedented. And so this is what I know. A leader knows that there will always be a crisis. In fact, we best shine when we are able to lead in a crisis, because that gives us an opportunity to lead. Leaders stretch to the challenge where followers will shrink from the challenge. You see, when facing a leader must be careful not to get distracted. You see, a crisis can be a distraction for a leader because leaders are action-oriented. And when a crisis comes like COVID-19 and it interrupts our time, it interrupts our routine, it interrupts our plans, interrupts our goals and messes with our budgets. But a leader is aware that there are 3 traps that she or he can fall into during a crisis. Let me just tell you what those are. The first one is the trap of mind wandering. And what you do here is you think about what could happen versus what is happening. And by the way, that's what the news media wants you to understand. What could go wrong, not what is happening. And so the problem here is that most of us default to an imagination of what's the worst case scenario rather than what's the best case scenario, knowing what the facts that we have. The second trap is a trap of negative thinking. And that's where we begin to think that anything that could go wrong is going wrong and will continue to go wrong. And so what happens is people get trapped into watching CNN, what I call, constant negative news. And one of the things that I had to do was at the beginning of COVID, I was watching all the time what was happening in the US, what was happening in Canada, what was happening in Alberta. And what was happening was I was getting sucked into this vortex, and I began to get sucked into this trap of being, oh no, negative thinking, which leads me to the third trap. And the third trap is the trap of uncertain anxiety. What does that mean? Well, because much of what COVID-19 was unknown, and by the way, most crises that you and I encounter is unknown, otherwise it wouldn't be a crisis. So when people's minds wander and then they embrace negative thinking, then everyone panics. And we saw that because that's where people were hoarding toilet paper. It had nothing to do with what the COVID virus was all about, but we began to panic. And here's what I know, that fear of the unknown will amplify your fears. Many of your friends who you thought were closet fearful people, but you really weren't quite sure, have been totally exposed during COVID-19. What a classic example is that when I'm driving down the road and I see an individual in a car all by themselves and they're wearing a mask. Why are they wearing a mask? They're fearful. So one of the big lessons that I had to learn here, based on these 3 traps, was I had to be very disciplined in guarding my thinking. Because if I didn't do that, then I would find myself sliding right into one of those 3 traps. So those are the 3 traps that we have to avoid when it comes to the experience like the pandemic that we're in right now.
That's amazing, Bob. I really appreciate how concise these points are and how relevant they are. So if you're interested in Bob's information, I'm going to link how you can connect with him below. And like I said, he's just an amazing leader that comes alongside of leaders. So if you have questions, this is the guy you want to consult with.
Appreciate that.
All right. Thank you so much, Bob.
Thank you for having me.